Hello, Americans, viewers of the news, and the names at those news locations is recorded, compressed, demonstrated, confirmed. Simultaneously, other is pretended, but that's also hyper evidential by foreign domestic bodies, where and how they are being and have been used remote. This is including with director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and people next to Fox Connecticut News, for example, involved all along roads and routes, where and how we have to use simultaneous and lists, but we're not being allowed to do this because of where and how a breaching method employed rolls with negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, and the causes of them and motivations with the syntax natures of people on all sides, with instances, recollections into databases, and with all sides in criminal and civil cases, news at the same time, and names at interbranch. And or two, the difference between them and their family members, everything like that, at the same time with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, the same way all victims slash hyper victims were forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to pretend other, while ignoring things involved with where and how we are syntactically manifest. Every, and then further as identity, hyper additionally as the ground's voicing and nature's voicing slash S. See, but we are now systems tactical ulterior from the one that is hyper native pure. And it has us all needing and has that's what has our founders value as every modern countries because we're grouped already from some ancient times in defenses of selves as uses of names, therefore, because this is an identity racketeering method, worse than war crimes. Nature shows us how to write the statutes that we all want to counter, which is that which hurts every name A through Z, at every country A through Z, at every location, area, and state for self-valued roles too, because of the extent of how this is. But to discern the breaching method, our founders communicated for us not to leave out discernment by using the list simultaneously of the collusions and the motivations planting to hide the foreign bodies involvement. And see what everyone missed too is there's a hyper foreign bodies involvement. And the same way it figured out how to torture, extort, infectory, nature, enslave the names of modern countries and territories, A through Z. It did the same thing since semi ancient times with grouped, all groupings, is syntactically tied to the value of why, which is only increasing why I say, in other words, we're how we are syntactically manifest, and why and how I and others have to use names, and why and how we have to appreciate simultaneous collusions. There are excuses for everyone, and forgiveness is for, in other words, who's telling properly and how they got away with this is attaching people to fake conversations, fake ties, fake natures of ties to others at every single campus we go to, and between them, and between the differences of public schools and private schools, where and how manifest, for example, there are means to observe how, since before our founders were born, a breaching method operated that had already been sustained upon while as it was coming to, from, as, with, and for names A through Z, and the same thing with their countries or what like kingdoms or whatever, and their groupings with suits and ties, counters to it, and exceptions. Also recorded self-valued as an array used remotely that way, and it's also screened by blaming other things, others yourselves, like where and how there are things that no one addresses. See, and there's relativity, for example. This breaching method forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded. uses of theory, words like theory, where the nature of debate are all formal and informal, and the differences between that. Locations, there are collusions. This is what is most used to further the overt criminal enterprises, the private ones, and those aspects and natures as the branches of government still has criminal insidious natures slash hyper criminal insidious natures, and where it's self valued is relative to where and how this breaching method from semi ancient times, from before modern religion's messengers, who demonstrably had to leave us to correlate with honesty and to just and not leave out how the sciences had already become abridged. Uses of the differences, therefore the names of humanity had already been now they're being used by systems tactically ulterior and as a shared system. Every time someone uses words like humanity, it's automatically the value of unity and of independence distinctly from ourselves. Well, as ourselves, well, not, but anyway, because every identity of the other species bodies too. Two eyes, all exceptions, exception nature, demonstrations of the same things, which is about how there are five ways grouped and how there are three ways grouped. The complete the complete identity to the extent we could discern. And when I say that, that means grouped too. It has a everything has a grouped identity of relationship. So, for example, the present participle, the past participle, and the gerund are grouped for the appreciation of reasons, how it works. The physics, the metaphysics are two distinct, but not while non-distinct sciences, and while identities volume science is too. See words like volume and programming, and database, and the names of the sciences. They were used in ancient times before modern religion's messengers were even born. The Republic had already been revealed. Yin Yang, Alpha and Omega, and ancient languages working together because appreciating. In other words, there are ways to fight and have it fun, and all sides win. Uh, and it stays that way only increasingly if that win is not going to be used as a nature of positive as a criminal insidious nature to hide what's really happening or relativity to that. There is an identity of hyper relativity that is more than just value. Increasingly, too, just alone as a distinct identity of hyper simultaneous, a distinct identity of simultaneous nature, if you don't want to call it that. In other words, that identity that is showing us is that identity of order slash S that has the order of humanity, distinct from the order of the other species bodies, but non-distinct from them. And simultaneous, we are simultaneous, they are simultaneous, but it is by a further greater than and more finite than science, but then further distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously slash hyper simultaneous, while as this science slash S. While as why time has three identities of sequence nature, distinct, and where and how it comes with nature demonstrating the only increasing value of what actually came was true, always, not denying the slightest sequence and or the value of what came first and or the value of the nature like of the questioner, and like per their motives. See, this is a method that employed the motives to use remotely because it knew that nature would continuously demonstrate to honest reason, honest correlation. See, correlation needs to, our founders told us to communicate what are witch trials about. Now, regardless of who made them up, they told us, first of all, to make, in other words, they communicated to us to understand the difference between what they said and what was communicated and what other people said, leaving out the difference between what they said and what they communicated. So, but we have not done this. We have not addressed extortion of George Washington, honestly, let alone of George Washington and of Marbury versus Madison and of James Madison. See, we still have forced roles, or they sense you and hurt you through our own, with identity theft, frauds, and slanders against our founders. Our country's A through Z, too, for how this breaching method employed self-valued syntactical defenses of and indoor indifferences to the value of the discernments that come with correlation by all the ways. The interbranch, the intelligence. We have to use the intelligence community is a phrase that people like me need to use. Additional ways that the government, the branches of government, and intelligence as themselves individually grouped and together, they can't do it. They're not allowed to. You know, and that's exploited. And to understand where and how, you have to understand this method is recorded. What is actually recorded? They have roles self-value with predicate acts with facts methods. Where and how people are as use Jane Austen's phrase, sense and sensibilities, but to use the word nature this way. For example, I as a word for identity that is hyper additional to the word identity. For the same reason, we need more words for a verb than just verb. We need to call it a participle. That proves that we have to call it a participle nature. For the same reason, three ways grouped is the gerund. Appreciation of and as um, uh, uh, what is constantly can be used as a can be used and is value as if it can be used as a present participle, but it could variably be used as a past participle. For example, per the way our nature is demonstrating, we should appreciate English, which begins with understanding how the experts on the languages have self-valued, criminally foreign influenced, and tactically delusions raw. Quality aspects and natures of uses / use roles of convictions and of quality aspects in nature associated with those convictions with short words regarding, you know, the identities of each of the sciences from off those locations where the sciences are manifest and on off the homes of people who do homeschool in if they mix it because the difference is used by a breaching method and the way it used already and uses remotely, people are showing them needs to take collusions with that. Like, for example, with readings of statutes where they have rights to lie about people. And they pretend that's all it is. But they have those lies apply to other locations as collusions to screen foreign bodies. And the same problem there, too. Not just because there's remote uses of grouped motivations narratives for the breaching method, too. Because it knows right where and how at each age of fact to be nature and our founders at each modern country, they communicated other than it's said for them. How this is gotten away with, for example, is how this breaching method effectively reassigned all values to have hyper additional meanings that would be used to justify being and staying, self valued as systems tactical ulterior from the one that is hyper, hyper simultaneous and positive to itself, which appreciates a special difference with reason. Descriptions. So they have, for example, the word slash value, sarcasm is about relativity. It is about how where things mean the opposite at the same time, relative to different. See, but we have a quality of fact human nature that is and has stayed collusion slash S, where and how the mode is irrelevant, where and how would sustain Native Americans against Native Americans through people that were against themselves too. Not just because of that, because of a breaching method, and not just because of that, because they didn't realize simultaneously, and not just because of that. What it's using is where and how no one wants collusions with that. And it's capable of sensing and discerning each individual voice, even if it's a majority, even if it's a majority of countries. If that voice goes against already assigned collusion slash S, with voices individually grouped together that already blamed other things others or self, already valued, self-valued, blamed other things others or self, the real causes of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, and or of criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatment natures. Like, for example, A, therefore B. Good or bad. So people are speaking about crimes, the experts on crimes, to understand where and how they have roles with predicate acts with facts. You have to understand that child abuse method that replaced the short words that describe our histories properly. American history and the history of modern countries A through Z. They're about a hyper predicate acts with facts delivery system method slash and or a criminal insidiousness nature slash hyper criminal insidiousness nature delivery system method and simultaneous denial method relative to who and slash hyper relative to where and to how. There are 5 distinct identities of hyper invisible but still indiscernible that come with the way simultaneously 2, 3 ways. Also, they are grouped. Like, for example, cell nucleus, cell body, cell wall, slash S. Those 3 identities of relationship to the complete identity of relationship to itself. The cell's identity, the cell slash S's identity, the plant's identity, part of the plant's identity. The whole planet's, in other words, it also has perception of gases and of their mixture and of the water and its elements. But per nature's system and method by positive and negative, which observation of this completely honest, it shows definitions and uses of words like constant and variable and consciousness, other than systems and therefore names. So systems self-value roles, self-just, fact-driven nature defends the roles that can't defend themselves with in their fact-driven equality, while valuing tactically replaced what each science was and is capable of properly convicting and or theorizing. So if things are wrong, they can be corrected. Like for example, having the breaching method employed, knowing there is an identity of relativity slash hyperrelativity that is necessary to be able to teach the sciences correctly. This breaching method employed uses of subjects, all subjects. So it's easier where it is easier to discern and where it is harder to discern. That is also lied about. How they get away with that is also recorded relative to this method here. For example, also relative to where and to how, even if it was made up. All the things, even in other words, there are things, if you search, because we're always having to hear things about things through others. And this was an inseparable part from the singular breaching method that is overt slash insidious, and simultaneously that is denied. Where and how that is gotten away with, to understand that the phenomena opened up that we could all observe, where total other countries in the news together at the same time they have roles on and off campuses with motivations, needs, and natures, where and how it is recorded how they self-value, planting fake motivations, even though it hurts themselves, even when it helps themselves. And the difference of that, like say, if they help someone, it's all they're pretend it's just about that. There are foreign bodies involvement with people's motivations, narratives, and nature. For example, where they want to have a debate, if something is, oh, you said something bad about the country, that's recorded, involved with predicate acts, um, criminally foreign influence uses of the country, and of each age of fact treating nature, and of each location slash S. Our founders told us to communicate about how our founders communicated for us to communicate about how overt criminal enterprises, private ones, insidiousness of the names A through Z, and the branches of government and the exceptions tied to them, like the people, the prisons, the people on off their state offices, of the corrections offices, of the state judicial branch offices. So Fox News, MSNBC, and CNN, they have shared sources where and how manifest our little jobs and things in natures who speak for the sciences, where and how they are manifest at each age and nature of campus, where and how this is a location slash F slash S, not just known and unknown, but then discovered ways. There is also a hyperway. All locations slash S are used criminally for and influenced on off the original founding locations. There were 13 locations that our founders had to counter extort the other founders at. as one. And then they were only capable of that too because of how the Native Americans were fighting and why the Native Americans were fighting with Native Americans syntactically and now sustained, therefore, then physically. And where how even the real causes of that in their syntax was being used by the breaching method remotely, and they did not understand and couldn't fathom how and why. It's a little magic trick /S. The breaching method showed each expert of each, um, all locations /S, and then further where and how the sciences are manifest, and the difference of that is used. Where and how it was and is manifest, there is also uses of corners of streets and of buildings. The FBI has people that recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed their roles with the witness protection program and with police forms with Whiting Forensics and with police forms with Sandy Hook campuses and with names on off the state corrections offices and with names on off the state judicial branch offices. Also involved with predicate acts with names on off the founding locations where our founders had to counter extort at the last of 13 original colonial positions. The other founders, besides the Native Americans, also as our founders, see president, see chief, see discern how communications is greater than and is more finite than what is said. And it values what that value what actually came first. Or it does not. And if it does not, nature shows. There is a hyperforensic trail that shows people painting forensic trails as collusions, even with killers, even with child abusers, leaders of kids, and leaders of elderly homes that are connected, leaders of um, veterans buildings, leaders of the people who deal with the problems and what they call solutions. So there's a complete syntactical possession of each identity of sophistication. There's conscious use /S of overt criminal enterprises, private ones, involved also how actually involved. So there's a man named Emmett involved with the intelligence community interagencies, and they have roles with medicines and with drugs crimes and with databases no one's looking into where they're putting fake transcripts as collusions with crime scenes, as predicate acts with facts roles, also where and how ducking collusions as fake conversations entice people and uses of it at corners of streets and at corners of buildings as collusions between the people. The intelligence community recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed interstates with intercities, how being and having been manifest, used remotely, and leading up to the World Trade Center attack long term, a number of ways short term. And since, because of the identity of relationship to itself, that is having to be hit, as the breaching method effectively knew, where and how people pretend they could speak for the law or its nature or identity or science or emotions of their own emotions or others. Emotions serve a function to show people when the hypernative system is being ignored. You know, and its conjunction and the value of its conjunction to where and to how we are syntactically manifest. Because nature uses words and values other than we are increasingly allowed to 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 discern. Because the quality of fact, how they get away with this, is how they have collusion at crime scenes relative to where and how effectively employed. our self-valued collusions, blaming other things, others, ourselves, for where and how they have sick uses of sick, white themed and black themed identities of logic with the interbranch and foreign at the same time, and where they're speaking about difference, and as overt criminal enterprises and private ones at the same time. Hartford Hospital has a whole bunch of people involved with predicate acts on my street through time, and they're sequence shifting. That's why they pretended I had ties to doctors as a kid. There are intelligence community groups with the campuses, UConn, Quinnipiac, Bryant University, Johnson and Wales, campuses in Vermont, Rhode Island, Connecticut. The military have roles, planting evidence as timed collusions with all of the countries in the news, criminally foreign influence uses of their difference. Then they want to have a debate about who could speak better for men or women. In other words, don't speak about women if you can't speak about the little girls in the top of that of those people stacking in New York City buildings. And if you want to pretend that's debatable, look too simultaneously with the list of things that is recorded, like how the veterans buildings are manifest. When we discern how they do solutions, CNN has sources like Sanjay Gupta. This is where good people, you know, are affected by this magic trick slash S. And there's chaos too, increasingly because of the roles of the intelligence, the logic experts in defenses of themselves, just because they're, oh well, I took this on, so I'm expert, but their logic and their nature is collusion. They're involved with planting fake transcripts and ties to people with foreign and domestic militaries, with remote uses of Robert Luskin, former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influenced and Corrupt Organization Act, RICO. The sources of MSNBC, CNN, and of Fox News, and of Barack Obama, and of Donald Trump, and of um, President slash Chief Biden too. Neither president voice, neither or chief's voice, or that slash is value. The president slash chief is distinct from saying president and chief as three ways. Even if it's not being used, the participle, the verb is the only increasing volume as their identity as value, as nature slash nature as value. Even once it's gone. And what that is a special difference. So you having a special difference that is hypernative pure. And nature is this difference. And nature is this word additional for identity. Because we only have it, and because how works, where how it is hyper invisible distinctly from how it is invisible but still discernible. That greater than, more finite than, and active as what each thing actually is. As it is when we make it a subject. We can't help but make it. Everything is hyper additional nature. Where and how it counts. And where and how physics are manifest as exception nature. In demonstration of other, that's also simultaneously with demonstrations of how it's in demonstration of the same thing. But we aren't being allowed to appreciate that, which is where and how grouped three ways. 5 ways, 3 ways. And the difference between that. People want to go, energy equals this. Time is a thing and it's a theory. Time is three identities of sequence nature's bound, past, active, and to the extent we know to come. And the value of sequence of what actually came before this. And the value, and there's a little bit more that we know. We don't know is constant about the future to come. There's some of it we know that's constant about the future to come. You know, it is what it is. The ancient saying. There are other ancient sayings like, thee who smelt it, dealt it. So we have to appreciate sequence shifts too. And we have to appreciate motives planting. So there are a whole bunch of different police departments who have ties to the same house/S, who were used as victims/hyper victims since they were kids. But where and how they would deny this, we could observe it where and how gotten away with are all the things denied and how they get like that which we know anyone honest that New York City has a lot of and cities across the world because the suburbs were designed tactically to nature, reliant upon needs to cause positive value nature progressions, action natures through systems again tactically ulterior from the one that is also positive unto itself while not as criminal insidious in its nature, but per its definition of it, which is the definition of which is a definition that can simultaneously defend itself and the Constitution unabridged. We have definitions of the Constitution, and we have readings of statutes that are justifications of it that can't be gotten away with without self-valuing more and more the quality of the aspects/s and natures slash s at all formal identity of the ground, law, reception, and delivery simultaneously in nature. Because three ways simultaneously are relevant. Just where relativity is to that finite, that grouped, and that simultaneous. See, not just our founders communicated to us to appreciate lists with our mind, with correlation, and with our syntax, other than could be afforded by those teaching about lists and arrays and what their value and meaning is, with relativity to the identity of value/value progression. Enabled not just by the circuit, enabled by our agreements regarding what to do with our energy that have been measured and maintained, not what we agree about. How that is gotten away with and or blamed on other things, others ourselves, including even when using truths. How that has gotten away with to be modified, you have to understand the use of location/s. Also, how the apparent motivations, those are propagated. Not one identity of one science, therefore even the law didn't self-value either criminal insidious simultaneously criminal insidious natures of positive treatments and negative treatments with perception, with information, the sources of Fox Connecticut News, of CNN, and of MSNBC. They are recorded on and off the campuses of Connecticut, on and off rolls, legal interbranch locations in the homes of their families and of corners of streets tied to people they communicate with. friends, etc. And the difference of that is also used. All natures of differences of the people around everyone. This is a method that puts predicate acts with facts roles to keep collusions with where and how people take oaths, leaving out all that they were actually capable of discerning. But everyone else did it too. The way the breaching method used remotely, each identity, the grounds, difference, difference of sophistication. The most sophisticated voices for the law have collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, in the insidiousness of logic A through Z, which can be discerned like where and how they speak about the value of voting, leaving out the value of mandated law, and or in the furtherance of definitions of and natures of uses of and treatments of mandated law. There have been collusions, and there are collusions with that which is the ground below the feet of the people of the suburbs, let alone of the cities across the globe. In Ukraine, in Russia, and in America, the suburbs had been designed by a semi ancient breaching method to be a landscape theater, to have people self cultivated, having been propagated, forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded to only know and justify all this, all that it takes to justify collusions where and how all individual groups and simultaneous differences were used to communicate other than nature would towards each person so they could measure self-valued roles with that or hurt that person even if it's a majority even of countries. So we have simple questions and where they are complicated simultaneously, both where they are simple and where they are complicated, that is lied about by the overt criminal enterprises, private ones in our branches of government. At the same time, we can use this as hyper evidential. Will cause slavery, for example, a predicate acts delivery system method slash hyper criminal criminal insidious nature delivery system method. And the difference of that is used because there are three ways reason appreciates the hyper invisible simultaneously, while it is five ways simultaneously. Computers have to mimic this. See, they could get away with pretending things are debatable. They can get away with pretending that the questions that logic experts ask are legitimate. They are not. That's why they have rules with courts tied to them, police forms tied to them, intelligence community, even military, foreign and domestic. Easy, remote possession of all campuses, including medical and fire campuses. Remotely used criminally foreign influence also at other locations. As timed collusions with that, which set a whole bunch of people that don't know each other at all, and people that knew all the difference of that too, employed that needed by the past people, while everyone's as factory nature stayed knaves. Employments individually grouped and together as the foundation of each location, area, and state of each modern country's name. Forcing trick when the leaders are not, and it's because it's relative to it. When the leaders are not, the locations, areas, and states are forcing collusions with other told tactically slash hyper tactically, and the motives in layers with the breaching method left out. Oh, it's my job. No, that's why we focus on this subject. They're leaving out all the natures of organized crime manifest. And the way to quickly understand it is how our founders communicated to understand it. The breaching method had already employed the branches of government as collusions with predicate acts with facts and has sick natures, way more sick than people that they had to counter. They had to be countered. And the breaching method knew this. They knew that they would use all that comes and came before them to hide nature's demonstrations of this and means to it by people even with no sophistication. But so they had to keep that though. So otherwise, this nature would have shown everyone. So you have the education that countries A through Z, tactically, criminally, foreign influence. They have the so the intelligence community recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. They make kids um, talk over and do little tricks with facts, make fake conversations, but like for people, they're adults to speak about it over the phone with other people using their names. There are a whole bunch of people who had conversations with a Timothy O'Brien and an Andrew O'Brien and a Dennis O'Brien. I don't know his mother's name, for example. And they have roles with identity thefts and frauds from other classrooms and parts of campuses with fake exceptions and then ones that are acted because they're people, they're attaching people and their family members to fake ties to others, fake natures of ties to others, and databases relative to as timed collusions with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. So there never stopped being investigators needing to investigate things at all locations slash s, increasingly needing to ignore how their own location was criminally foreign influence and had ties and natures of ties to the same locations slash s they would have to, they couldn't afford to to bring revelations that could be used with that, and or they need the exceptions to keep hidden how exceptions and exception nature is being used and has been used, tactical ulterior from how nature demonstrates reason needs to use and value exceptions and exception nature, which is being led by how it uses it the ways we any way we could finite in the grouped and all together. Every finite part of our body has these one slash three identities of possession over it, where it has a conjunction, where the parts of your body have conjunction to the value of your syntax, for example, of your convictions. There are positive and negative treatments. There are Boolean logic treatments, as we are only allowed to have defined our agreements and or our differences. Look at the two root words in the word Boolean. Boo and lean. See, we have expert lean too. And look and hear how it sounds like bullying. Bully. Look how they repeat the term bullying. Oh, school bullying. That's because they're hiding sequence shifts and fake motivations planting as their roles with where and how manifests not sickly, non-distinctly every individual name is hurt the same exact way by the same breaching method. It is manifest as an identity theft, fraud, slander method, and self-bodied roles with it and uses of that by others, and or that body is sensed. Again, even if that body is a majority, even of countries. This is relative to where and how the hyper-evidential shows us. There are other reasons that no one can afford to discern where and how really. evidence like that and how we had black pupils and whites of eyes and exception nature. And how that was left out simultaneously with how the breaching method. See, the breaching method is hyper invisible but still discernible. Use slash S of crazy laws against everyone that were also simultaneously forced pretended other. And or also the causes and motivations for that. Even when true, because it was it puts the truth for them. Foreign bodies do. And while they're being used and have been used remotely. You think sanity and integrity spoke for the military has to follow orders. They are fact tribute nature enslaved. So we have to address how intercampuses they have been used criminally for and influenced overtly slash insidiously while simultaneously pretending other. That's three ways simultaneously. And it's relative to where and to how they got away with forcing equality of fact tribute nature at all formal law locations as collusions with predicate acts illusions roles, with tactical delusions roles, with predicate acts with facts methods, like wire crime methods and simultaneously pretending other no and planting fake motivations for it. Fox Connecticut News and WFSB are recorded involved with recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with sources that are also involved with national news sources and with people on Fox Connecticut News in the buildings next to them, who also have roles with names all along roads and routes, like Route 3 and like Route 175, where judges and prosecutors and their family members are used as victims slash hyper victims, but as victim predators slash hyper predators, as roles with use slash S of all locations slash S, like along roads and routes. Use of the different use slash S of the difference of the identities of the companies at shopping centers, right through the different identities as those companies, as those businesses. The difference of that is also easily discerned. And where it's hard to discern, it's tactical ulterior, how they describe it. James Comey is the name reported by Congress as one of the FBI recorded involved with predicate acts for facts with them and with tactical delusions with them, relative where to how they left out the black people's whites of eyes, exception nature, hyperscope, and how it was left out. They left out the breaching method too simultaneously, and they pretend others simultaneously. So these three things are connected and increasingly valued simultaneously, equally. Three parts, three ways, three identities of zero are connected to the identity of hyperrelativity. That is an identity of positive relativity to positive and negative, one way that will not change. And it will only make more positive the same way each identity will. All exceptions in exception nature that appear to be in demonstration of other are really in demonstration of the same thing, but it is simultaneously in demonstration of the difference between positive as criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments, including how we are syntactically manifest, and of negative treatments. Because the identity of relativity, the identity of hyperrelativity, why there are those names three ways, five ways, there's the predicate, the verb, too, as names for the verb. There's its name, we know there's a verb. So we have the participle nature. We have uh, the participle natures and the gerund. That's the present participle, past participle. And this is where and how we are appreciating the name, the identity of volume as a verb, as a nature. So we can discern, we're appreciating it as a hyper invisible, but still discernible, slash invisible, but still discernible. And the other sequence is true. That is true, vice versa. Conversely, it is true. Simultaneously slash hyper simultaneously, three ways. It is three ways conjunctive to what will not mix with, as what will not mix with, temporary, slash lasting positive, and as what already is mixed, and it as it, and as what won't, but it does anyway, grouped, where and how it connects. This active part of us, while connected as the order of the finite, and that extent we know, for example, is true always about the future. And the extent we know that we don't know about the future. And when we pay attention to all five parts simultaneously, that expands. It shows us more. See, but this showed the knowledge of good and evil. This showed how to expand criminal insidiousness natures of collusions with abridged sciences, and or differentially in the difference between that, between who and when, overt criminal enterprises and private ones, complete strangers, and the difference of that, and increasingly everyone next to everyone, because they're verifying things corruptly, because they need to hide lie progressions, our country's intelligence communities, and they're using and having used their differences while pretending fake motivations, because they're keeping the nature of debate used to imply things, because they're increasingly showing the intelligence community they need to hide what was actually recorded around, the value when they were kids and now at each age of campus. So a whole bunch of people recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. There are people with the name Dylan and Cololo and Officer Jerry Miller, and people there, and Officer people with the name Jerry Kerr and Mike Kerr, and there's a Joe DeMorrow, more than one Joe DeMorrow, and there's a John DeMorrow. And the Paul DeMorrow, I only had one conversation in my life. He confessed roles. He has confessed, demonstrated, confirmed nature roles. Not realizing that way, but nature roles with his brother's confessions and demonstrations of roles timed with abuses of little kids with overt criminal enterprises when they were in middle school, and has collusions with people with that when they were in grammar school, attaching little kids to fake ties and natures of ties to other people, spying on them and using truths for lies and making conclusions with it. So they're planting fake motivations about how they feel and why they feel about other people when they're jumping in on conversations online. Connecticut Interbranch jumps in and describes people and what they think about their posts dishonestly because of their roles with a whole bunch of natures of sick things, where and how they're sick factory natures. They're putting fake conversations with kids in databases as police departments, families, to hide what they were used since they were kids for. And these are increasingly families that have roles with the families at mental health locations, like Hartford Hospital's Institute of Living. Simultaneously, a whole bunch of legal natures and police forms of the medical locations involved with predicate acts there, fake conversations with fake ties to people as collusions with crime scenes. These are people that deal with when people yell relative to where and how they have roles with weapons and drugs and poisonous crimes and forensics locations covering up things and roles with that, with our remote uses of all formal identities as well in their nature. Eh. Okay, thank you, people.